Welcome everyone to another Low Brass U Studio class, episode 3 in fact. And before we get started, we have to bring on this gentleman. Oh, and we've got all kinds of things on the screen that shouldn't be there.
Yeah!
Just great overall start. Let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of that. No. Great. If you've watched the stream before, you know that one of the best parts about it is that we've never once had a single technical issue. We want to run a flawless stream. I think I made the same joke last week when something else happened. But sorry about that. We should be smooth sailing, or hopefully close to smooth sailing. You never know. You can't ever be super sure of that. But yeah, it's been a kind of a hectic week. I didn't plan as well as I would have liked to this week. I was pretty busy with doing a middle school and high school band camp at Tarleton State University, where I'm going to be teaching in the fall, which I don't think I said on the stream at all. So I'm the new adjunct professor of low brass there. So it should be fun, and it's been interesting dealing with middle schoolers in a group setting. I was trying to remember the last time that I worked with group setting middle schoolers. It's been a long time.
Mm-hmm.
That's like not a thing that I do very often. You know, it's like teach lessons to middle schoolers, but that's different than, you know, one-on-one.
Yeah, that's a whole different animal. How many middle schoolers at once are you supervising right now?
I have like all of the low brass, like trombones, tubas, and euphoniums. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but maybe like 20.
Oh boy, that's a lot.
Enough. So it's been interesting. It's been fun, but
nice.
You know, it's definitely been interesting.
Yeah,
to say the least. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I'm like, tomorrow I've got a concert with the trombone group. It's like an octet of trombones that I'm going to be conducting, and my conducting is flawless. Everyone's always said I should quit playing brass instruments because I'm actually a better conductor.
Right, people say that. They definitely say that.
Right. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I think I can do floor, wall, ceiling just enough to handle this piece. But it's going really well. It's been fun to work with, especially that group, because that's like the smallest group that I have is just like those 8 high school players, and we're working on a nice like chorale-like piece, and it's a lot of fun. We played with dynamics today. That's what we did.
Ooh, that's hard.
It is.
I forget
hard.
to do that most of the time.
It's very easy to forget to do. You're not the only one who forgets.
Playing loud is fun. It's
right.
my favorite one.
What song are they playing? It's literally, I don't have it on hand. It's literally called Chorale. I can't remember who wrote it, which I know is terrible of me. It wasn't a piece that I was familiar with. It's a library special of just like going through things and hoping to find something.
Wow, you don't know the composer?
I don't.
You claim to be a low brass expert, but you don't know who wrote Chorale?
Right.
Like prove yourself.
Right.
You think you know low brass? Who wrote Chorale?
Yeah. Now you got me.
Hello, Troy Gaming Maccabee. Great to see you.
Yes. Hello, Troy.
There you go.
Troy has been our only submission for the Low Brass U Studio class performance spotlight. So everyone should be like Troy. And
be like Troy.
Be like Troy and submit.
The world needs more Troys.
Would I be able to find a recording of it? I doubt it. I could be wrong. It definitely doesn't seem like it's a piece that's well known. Maybe I can record the performance tomorrow. Maybe.
It's a good idea.
It's a good idea. I don't know how serious I want to get with that. That seems like that'll be kind of a headache. But maybe I'll just record the audio or something from a memento.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It's been nice, meeting some of my new work friends and new colleagues. So yeah, it's been fun. It's just been hot.
I imagine.
I mean, it's hot everywhere in Texas right now, but but it's
I have read that.
It's definitely hot. Yeah, our power grid may not be able to handle it. I don't know if you've read about that.
I certainly have.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a conversation for a different podcast.
Right.
Nice mug.
Thank you. That I only drink water out of. I don't think I've ever put coffee in there.
That's fine.
I just don't want to stain it. I know that sounds really silly, and it doesn't matter. That's my one low brass U mug. And I have other mugs. And it's not... If it were coffee drinking time, I would probably use it on stream. But it's not really coffee drinking time for me. Not even decaf at this hour. That's only if I'm like on a gig and I'm dragging, you know, that I can I can do that. But yeah, so yeah, we don't have any super specific topics for today. We kind of got into some stuff last week that I think was pretty good. Not to call you out on it, but you did say last week that you were thinking about recording an excerpt. I assume since you have not mentioned it in a few days that did not come to fruition.
Yep, that left my goldfish brain pretty much immediately after the stream last time. So I'll have to do that. I don't know where my sweet spot is with the Bolero.
Right.
I can tell you that right now it's probably not the stock key.
Right.
Unless we're talking about down an octave. Even that, then you're getting into other territory that I won't sound good on.
Yeah, it's already pretty low.
Yeah, I don't have the equipment with me in this room to 8VB the Bolero.
Right.
So I have been working on something else, though, that maybe I should submit for next week. I have a
your
bunch of recordings from this week. Single tonguing Odyssey is, we can get into the weeds on that, but also...
Because we haven't, off stream, we haven't really talked about it.
Right.
I've seen your social posts, but I honestly haven't, we haven't talked about it.
Right. So I think I can talk about it now. I think I'm on a single tonguing Odyssey right now where I'm trying to add single tonguing as a limitation to my articulation and using that as a vehicle for more extemporaneous, more like in the moment improvising. Because what I found was when I was just kind of letting whatever fly out of my horn when I was taking solos or improvising in a setting like that, I wasn't satisfied with the sound that I was getting, particularly just the fronts and the consistency of the shapes of the notes that I was playing. They were all different shapes and sizes, and sometimes that's cool, but there were other times where that led to inconsistencies, particularly for me with time. And what I noticed is when I limit myself to just a single tongue, first off, all the fronts of my notes sound the same, and I think it sounds cool. It's just kind of a cool effect. Maybe it's not how I want to take every solo for the rest of my life, but I like the sound of those really, really consistent, almost like JJ style fronts to the notes.
Right.
And not to say that I sound like JJ Johnson at all, but we all,
you heard it here first.
Something.
Connor thinks he's JJ Johnson.
I think I'm JJ Johnson. Yes. But
timestamp it.
It's kind of kept the lid on things, but now actually, as of like today, I'm kind of going in a different direction. I'm experimenting. I think that I have too much of a good thing going on there because I found a recording of myself from like last week at a jam session.
Okay.
On like they had like a 2.5 hour live stream of the whole thing and uploaded it, which is super cool because then I went back and listened. Because when you're at a session, like you get really excited when you're playing. You don't really know what's going on, especially they're all new people, and it kind of goes by and it's over before you know it. And I have left this particular session many times already, thinking like, man, I don't really remember how that went.
Right.
And I've been wanting to record myself on my phone. I just kind of keep forgetting because again, goldfish brain. But I got to listen to it yesterday and I heard the single tonguing thing and I was like, okay, that's pretty good in time. I don't think that I'm getting the return on that investment that I think I'm getting as far as like the single tonguing really, really helping myself. Because at the end of the day, when you're playing live, like you're excited and the energy's higher, my time was just getting weird. And it's like, that wasn't really helping anything. It was just kind of adding this weird stylistic extra thing that was maybe distracting, maybe not. I'm not sure. I think I need to practice it more. But what I also noticed was as I was trying to keep a lid on my overall energy level so I didn't do things like blat really loud and I didn't rush or play anything whack, I ended up taking a really, really safe, really boring solo with not a whole lot of variety. I was just like, wow, like it was technically accurate and it was pretty in tune and it was okay, but it was boring. And I think that I would have rather had played something that was really the stuff that was actually coming off the top of my head, that maybe was less in tune or maybe rushed, and would have had a little bit more of that in the moment sort of feel, as opposed to this like very polished C- version of improvising. So I don't know. I'll go and try it the other way today and see what happens.
Yeah, I think that there's always, no matter which way you go, like I can, I don't think it's necessarily the most beneficial to name names in this scenario, but there are lots of players that I can think of that go with the like, I'm going to play a perfect solo thing, and I think that it's a good tool, but it also, you can get that to be a level where it's almost to the point where it's like, it is just what you're thinking. You're thinking a perfect solo. You know what I mean? Versus they're kind of other people who approach it more so as, I'm going to just play more what's off the top of my head, and it's going to go where it's going to go. And it's going to sound how it's going to sound, but maybe over time practice my single tongue, do all those sorts of things, and it gets better, in the future.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of the crossroads that I'm at, is like, do I really pare it down and get it so I'm only playing things that are technically perfect, and will that sort of musical headspace grow into something that is more creatively satisfying?
Right.
Or do I just jump in the deep end, and then through exposure therapy, it kind of whittles itself down in the process of really, really like, is it more important that I'm playing perfectly, or is it more important that I'm truly improvising? And like, which one will get, like, I think they're both trying to get to a center point of aesthetically pleasing, but also taking educational risks.
Right.
And it's like, well, which way is it going to be? Which way am I closer at, and which way is going to be the more productive avenue for me? Because I think that truly in my brain, I'm hearing something that's not quite as wild as when I just let it go nuts. I'm truly hearing something probably more exciting than this very tame idea of improvisation that's like, wow, that could fit in an etude book, man. That's great.
Right.
Write it down. So I don't know. I'm going to try a couple of different things, because I've got all summer. School's pretty much out. So we're going to be going to some sessions. We're going to try to figure some stuff out. Woohoo! Yeah, academic year. We did it. That was a weird one.
Yeah. I definitely thought my summer would be less intense than it's turning out being. And it's, it's for a multitude of reasons at this point. But just like the amount of days that I feel like this month will be the fewest days that I've spent sleeping in my own bed in probably like the last 2 or 3 years. Like, it's just been,
can't do that.
Like, I will tonight. I came back for this stream. So if anyone's questioning my dedication, I could have canceled this stream, but instead I drove a decent distance to make sure that this stream could happen in the way that it normally happens, which is without any technical problems. I just like to really stress that, again, that we never have any technical problems. Everything is perfect. We're just professionals,
It's really important that you hold yourself to a certain standard and you keep yourself honest with it. And, you don't let that falter. Like, there's a certain quality that we adhere to on the stream.
Right.
And we never compromise that. Hey, Elvis. Great to see you, Elvis.
Yeah. There we go. And I got the comments
working. A bunch
working.
of really good question.
Yeah.
Two really good questions.
So should we start with the poor double tongue? Any advice? Do you want to start, or should I start?
I should start, because I too have a poor double tongue, and I think about it a lot. And I just had a really interesting
Are you claiming that I have a better
conversation.
double tongue? Because I don't know that that's true.
The floor can only go so low, Zach. There's just a certain level where it may be just indiscernible mush.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's something that whenever I have, well, maybe first off by saying I avoid double tonguing pretty much like as much as possible until I absolutely have to do it. And that's probably dumb too, because I should probably be practicing it a little bit more, just so like when I do have to like get it out of the pantry, it's not, spoiled goods. But I've done some stuff working on it and had excerpts that I was required to play in front of humans that I was going to have to do it. And the only advice that, people have given me, it's kind of similar to playing in the higher range. It's like, wow, yeah, you don't play your high notes very well because you probably don't play in the high range very often. Same thing with double tonguing. That's
Right.
probably why I don't sound very good double tonguing, is because it's not an everyday thing for me. And maybe it should be. I should probably be touching it at least a little bit just to check on it. That could be an important summer project for me, is to kind of get a healthy relationship with it. But things that I've done before were like playing whatever excerpt that is that you're working on, like half tempo, just only using your cuz or your guz or whatever your back glottal syllable is.
Your second syllable.
Your second syllable. Well, sometimes it's people's first. I met a trombone player recently out here in the Northwest. Fantastic. He's just doing all this crazy modern vocabulary. And I asked him, I was like, man, like you sound like you're doing this like really aggressive, like single tongue. And I was like on my single tongue Odyssey. And I was like, tell me how you worked that up. And he was like, no, that's a double. I double tongue everything regardless of the tempo. I'd never heard that before. How amazing is that?
I mean,
just double tongue everything. He said sometimes he takes a solo, it's only cuz.
I mean,
believe that?
Science said that could exist, but
it can.
I've
just never known anybody who's committed to it, and it was a funny reason why. It was the articulation. When you're doing a ka articulation, there's like a certain softness to it, particularly in like the high register, that he was getting this really, really cool sound. It was like super, super melodic. This is also, for context, someone who doubles. I don't know which one is the primary, which is a good thing to not know about somebody, but they play tenor saxophone extraordinarily well, and they play trombone extraordinarily well. And so maybe there's some sort of articulation stuff there that or at least maybe pedagogically, when you're going back and forth between two different schools of thought, between two instruments, maybe you're thinking about things a little more outside the box than somebody who maybe only lives in the brass world. That's a long detour to say, just try it really slow, only play your cuz.
Yeah. I think my advice is very similar. It's like you have to be doing it. Things like that aren't going to get better. It's not like there's the advice that we could say is, well, if your tongue just does exactly this, and you will instantly pick up your instrument, and then you will be the perfect double tonguing trombonist or whatever instrument. It's like you won't. That's not really how it works. I also just try to slow things down. Anything that I'm, especially at this point in time. I mean, I know how fast I can single tongue. I know how fast I need, or when I need to use the double tongue. And so if there's something that I know that I'm going to need the double tongue for, I won't even ever practice it single tongue. I'll only practice it slowly with a double tongue, and then go from there. So definitely starting slow and building that muscle memory, and then slowly speeding it up over potentially weeks, potentially months. Depends on the situation, depends on how hard it is. But I think that's kind of an important thing. Let's keep going on with Sonata's question. What advice would you give someone who's considering doing tuba/music in college? Well, Connor, you're fresh off of the virtual tuba euphonium conference, or should I take this one?
I started the last one. You start this one.
Fair enough.
It's a good question.
I mean, most of the advice is not really instrument specific. I will give some instrument specific advice, but for tuba, the instrument specific thing for tuba, if you're gonna, it depends on if you're gonna be a performance major, if you're gonna be an education major. It depends on what kind of schools you're looking at. Keys of tuba is a weird thing, especially in the transition into college in most situations, because you're probably playing a B-flat tuba now. Your college teacher might force you, or might want you, or might encourage you. The exact word might change to play C tuba going into or once you're at college. So if that's really what you want to do, sometimes it's helpful to do that a little bit before then. But also tubas are expensive, and I'm not trying to insinuate that just buying a tuba is a really easy thing. It's not really that simple usually. But a lot of schools will really want you to have your own tuba. It depends on the school, what their situation is. But yeah, as far as just it's not always about being the best in the audition. I think it's about being teachable. And I think the single best piece of advice I can give someone who's looking to go into college with music is especially if there's a specific school or a list of schools, try to have as many lessons as you can with the teacher there. It depends on who it is. If they'll do it for some people, for prospective students, give you a discount. Some people do it for free. Some people charge you their rate, and it's a lot. But trying to do that sort of thing where you're going and you're trying, because it's important that you have what you believe to be a workable relationship with this person. So I did a really good job with that. I think with my master's degree, I had four schools on my list. Yeah, four schools, and all of them I made sure to go and try having lessons with all the teachers. And the ones that got to the top of my list, the two that I was choosing between, Northwestern and Baylor, I had maybe 2 or 3 lessons with each of them, and spent even more significant time. So I think that's one of the most helpful things, because you'll be able to gauge what they think about you and what you need to work on. Because ultimately, I think an important thing, and I'm sure Connor you'd agree with this, is not every teacher is looking for the same thing in a student necessarily.
Oh yeah.
You could get a full ride to one school and reject it from another and play, be the exact same player. But some teachers might want you to be more focused on excerpts. One might want you to do more etudes, do more solo stuff, get more comfortable playing in these certain styles depending on what you're doing. So I think that's an important thing. It's just to find the teachers that find the schools that you want to go to, and try to have lessons with all of those faculty, because I think that's ultimately, no matter what we say, that's what will actually matter. Mm-hmm. Do you have any thoughts, Connor? Maybe not instrument specific, or it could be?
No, I don't really have that many instrument specific points. You hit a lot of the good things. I would say, another consideration is what part of the world do you want to be in when you get out of college? That doesn't always matter, and that isn't always a deal breaker, or even like the, premier, like most important factor for people's college decisions. And it could be the case that you could get a slamming degree from a cool program and then move to another city and have a great time. I did that. It was awesome. I highly recommend that. But also, there is the opportunity cost of, wherever you go to go do this degree program, you're going to be spending a significant amount of time getting to know, not only your professors and the students and the musicians that are going to eventually live and grow up in that area, but also the professors. Even, they're not the only thing that's happening maybe in that music scene, but they're certainly going to be a credible gatekeeper that could help you leverage yourself into a musical scene. And so I would say, having a professor who shares the values and can get you to the learning goal or whatever it is you want to get out of the degree program is super important. But also maybe look at, what professors or people in a music building, a music school, are living the sort of, life that you want to live. If you want to do the freelance thing for a while, and see what type of work are they doing when they're not teaching these lessons, because that's the type of work that's going to be available in that town. So that's something to consider.
Yeah, I think, we could probably segue this a little bit into just the question of how to choose a school, what schools should you look at. And I think, Connor, you kind of mentioned, it's like your goals are important. Mm-hmm. If I say that like all I want to do is be an LA studio musician, probably going to school in Michigan's not going to help me as much as
right. It might.
It's not like it will set you up poor. I guess you would get a good education potentially, but you should probably go study with the people who are doing the job that you want. And in a lot of ways, that kind of stuff is very helpful. Finding teachers that are doing the things that you want to end up doing, or what degrees you want to get. And there are lots of different, especially talking about where the city is. When I was looking at schools for grad school for my master's, that was a big factor, especially as an older student. You don't necessarily, it starts to matter a little bit more. I think for an undergrad, that should be kind of a lower thing. but it just depends. If you want to be a tuba player who plays on pop music or something, maybe go to school in Nashville. Maybe go to school in LA. Like those sorts of things. Where you go to school does dictate some things, but I also think it's really important to look at the music school as a whole. The instrument specific studio and the teacher, but also the school as a whole. You might be paying for this piece of paper. You want it to have some, value kind of through and through is the ideal situation. But it's weighing all of these sorts of things. It's like picking a car in a racing game. It's like this one has acceleration, but this one has top speed, this one has turning, and it's this school might be exactly in the city you want to live in, but it might be really expensive, or it might not have the best academics, and especially music school, that stuff gets tricky because it's sometimes really important to people, sometimes it's really not. Sometimes they specifically want a school that doesn't have academics at all by going to like a conservatory or something like that. And you kind of have to make some of those decisions for yourself at some level. But between the two of us, we've been to only 3 schools despite the amount of degrees that we've had.
Yes, that's incredibly diverse between the two of us.
But there are 3 pretty different schools.
Extremely, yeah.
Like North Texas being really large, just numbers wise. For the music department, College of Music is huge at the University of North Texas. It's, and Northwestern, WKU being significantly smaller. I assume Northwestern is slightly larger numbers wise in the music, but I don't know that to
I
be
would
true.
bet, but probably not by an incredible amount.
Yeah, that's what I would guess.
If we're talking about just like people in the room. How big was like the tuba studio at Northwestern while you were there, if you remember off the top of your head?
Yeah, it was 2 separate numbers, I guess, but I would say if I had to just guess a number out at the top of my head, maybe 12, 13, 14, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it was probably fairly similar then. It would have been around the same number. There were years that were less and there were years that were more, or around 12.
But by comparison, UNT has a 40-person tuba studio and a 40-person euphonium studio, not combined. The 80 combined, it's 80 people or so. I'm not sure the exact numbers right now, but that detail alone doesn't necessarily mean good or bad, but it's definitely it's different.
It's way different. It's like living in a weird village of everyone plays the same instrument. It's bizarre. It's like meeting a bunch of your relatives for the first time.
Right.
When you live in that sort of environment, there's good things about the small school and there's good things about the big school. I think. I didn't mean to cut you off there. Finish your thought. Though.
No, you're good. But
just
to kind of continue what you're saying now, there's good things about each. And I think people always have like a grass is greener approach to a lot of those sorts of details. It's like you can extrapolate that to anything, but like especially the size. You're going to get a different sort of experience being one of 12 and maybe being the only freshman or something like that. That is a unique experience compared to, being one of 12 freshmen or something and, 14, whatever the number, you're going to be that's also, but there's also so many great things about it. It's like, especially when I was at UNT, I always found someone who's better than me at a specific thing. And I was just like, hey, how do you do that? Because there's always somebody who does something better with those sorts of numbers. And it's just, like, what do you practice? How do you work on that? And then it's like, I'm going to steal that for myself. And that's kind of how I approach a lot of that sort of stuff. At a smaller school, even if there are a lot of good players, that sort of thing is not always, there's just not as much diversity between things. And it's like if you're the lone grad student in, there are a bunch of undergrads. Maybe and the undergrads can also be very good, don't get me wrong, but, it's just a different experience to have maybe no one your age or no one your, in your specific situation. And sometimes a small school is great when you're the youngest person because everyone's helping you out and showing you the ropes and things. But then there could be other ways where it's not. And sometimes you might feel like you're not as good as everybody else or whatever. They're always there are pros and cons to each side. There's definitely no perfect school. There's no perfect music school. It's just juggling all of the different things, and you have to know yourself to some extent, which is tricky.
Yeah, it's hard.
So,
and if you're at a stage in your life where you're just now thinking about, you're beginning the thought process of, would I like to pursue music in college? Would I like to play the tuba in college? It's very well the case and completely appropriate that you don't know what you want out of it. And as long as you go in with an open mind, you will probably very quickly find out what it is that you want to get out of this musical life that you're interested in pursuing. I know that was very much the case for me when I started my undergrad at Western Kentucky University. I think if I had gone to a school where there was, go Hilltoppers, absolutely, go Tops.
Tops.
But
sorry.
if I had gone to a big school and auditioned for the wind band, and I made 75th trombone, and there's 8 freshmen sitting right next to me, and we all kind of sound the same, would have been like, okay, cool, this is good. For my personality, I would have thought, okay, maybe I flunked the audition, but I'm right in the middle of all the other freshmen. This is all right. It's all good. When I went to the small school, what happened was I was 18. I auditioned for the wind band, and I got second to last in the only wind band. And the only person that did worse than me was the trombonist, who was the principal trombonist the semester before. But I think he didn't practice or something. And even though he sounded like $1,000,000, they just put him on last chair.
Sounds like he did something wrong.
Maybe he didn't show up for the audition. Maybe that's what it was.
That sounds about right.
I think that it might have been like a forgot to do it. Wasn't sure they were going to be in concert band. It was something like that. Anyways.
Yeah, they weren't happy with him.
I got there and I'm sitting second to last banana, already feeling pretty crummy already. And then I've got Captain Fantastic sitting right next to me, just blowing me out of the water in actual last chair. And I remember sitting there thinking oh my gosh, this is not, I am not cutting the mustard. And eventually I kind of understood wow, this guy's particularly amazing, and had this great relationship with Keith was his name. Still a fantastic trombone player. I learned so much, and I think at a larger school, I might have just gotten lost in the weeds and just been an inconsequentially okay trombone player. That's my personality type. I needed a wake up moment of oh my gosh, you're not cutting the mustard. And I also needed that unique small studio relationship of people kind of pushing me along before I really had a clear direction of where I needed to be going. And it worked out for me that was particularly helpful, because then it got me sort of curious about other things I wanted to do, and ended up having a really, really positive experience at WKU. But that was my small school, kind of episodic little experience there.
Yeah,
I might share.
I think that's, there are even more extreme examples. It's possible to be the only euphonium player at a school. That's not that uncommon at a small school to not be one of two. And there are certain things that are really good about being one of one or one of two. Let's say you're the only euphonium player and the orchestra, and you're a freshman, and the orchestra is playing Planets. It's just all of a sudden it's just well, who's going to do it? You're going to do it. It's well, but I'm a freshman. I shouldn't be playing an orchestra or whatever. No, you're going to be doing it because you're the only one. Something like that at a school like UNT probably doesn't even matter how good you are. It's probably not going to be the case. That's I played Planets while I was at UNT in the orchestra, and we had a DMA student.
Right.
That's the sort of thing that's going to, and especially that's obviously a very extreme example. Euphonium and orchestra. That's basically very rare, but that's a really that's a quality experience that you're way more likely to get, or something like graduation band, which most schools do and tend to pay the students to do. If you're a young student at a big school, that's probably not going to you, but as a young student at a smaller school, that's something you might be able to find yourself doing. There are very nice perks about. There are good things about both sides. That's ultimately it. and different people thrive at different ones, or you thrive in different ways. I think that for me, I think I needed the big school experience young to realize, like, oh, I'm not as good as I thought I was, you know, like, especially like a high school version of myself. You know, it's like I needed to hear people that played better than me. Not that I didn't know that it was out there, but I didn't know as well as I found out.
Right.
You know, to go from, you know, feeling like, well, of course I would be the best freshman, and then to showing up being like, oh, I'm not even the best freshman. That's too, like, at anything.
Right.
You know, like, but like not one of these things. So, you know, it's like that's the sort of thing that was really helpful for me, because then, you know, even in my own class, because it was so large, there were all these people that I could learn from, and, you know, you're hanging out with them all the time. You're able to pick their brains, and you know, sometimes that works. You know, it just works differently at different sizes of schools, and we put a lot of this emphasis on size of school. But there are so many other factors of choosing a school.
Right.
You know, like I think location is something I definitely thought about. You know, when I was in high school, I wanted to get out of my home state. Kentucky is a beautiful place, but I was looking to go. You know, and I wanted to try Texas on for size, and so I did. And, you know, when I was doing, you know, my master's, I wanted to. I mean, Dallas is a pretty big market, but, you know, Denton's not really Dallas, and, you know, I wanted to have a pretty, like, big city experience as well, because I kind of thought that I wouldn't ever end up in a big city, but I wanted to at least dabble. And I definitely didn't want to go to a smaller city than, like, the metroplex of Dallas-Fort Worth. So that was a big reason why I went to Northwestern, was because it was outside of Chicago, and I lived in Chicago. So, you know, those sorts of things, those matter a lot. How, you know, what's the wind ensemble at that school doing? Are they going to Midwest? Are they doing big conference things? Are they playing at the Educators Association for that state? You know, are they doing things? Because you'll find yourself, you know, doing more if, you know, there are more opportunities for things like that, and all that sort of stuff is just really good, like networking and all those sorts of things. But I think ultimately, to me, it still always starts at the teacher.
Definitely.
I would rather have a great teacher in a town that I don't like, and, you know, at a school I don't like, or that it's not what I wanted out of a school. You know, there's so many different things to think about, and even schools just in general. It's like, what are their dorms like? Does that matter to you? I didn't choose any schools based off of dorms, but people...
It might be a factor.
People do, and I mean, you're going to be living there probably. It might be relevant to your overall happiness. So, you know, there are a ton of different things. You know, I talk about it with my students who are, you know, most of the conversations I have are about with my college students going into, you know, trying to find a master's degree, or school for a master's degree. And I think that a lot of the advice is still the same. It's you have to go somewhere with a good teacher. I think that's, you know, number one. And I think that you need to try out the teacher, and because you might read about somebody online and say, oh, this person's great, they've done all these things, they sound really good, everybody seems to like them, and then you might, you know, interact with them and say, this is not a person I want to ever see again. And it's better to find that out in a lesson than it is in, you know, in the fall semester of your freshman year of college.
Right. I think when you're talking about the master's degree, though, there's a couple of other layers to it. Sure. That might be worth discussing. Like if you're someone who's thinking about going and getting a graduate degree, you likely already have a job in your head that you'd like to have, or a place that you'd like to live and be working in. Those are kind of like the two big reasons, at least for, I would imagine, somebody in low brass wanting to be pursuing a master's degree at all. Either it's going to be some specialized degree in pedagogy, or, you know, arranging or composition or something like that, or you want to teach college, or you want to teach, I don't know, lead trumpet at Sam Houston State University or something like that. I don't know.
I'm not 100% sure of what Brian is mentioned, or is that about you might not like the person, you might never want to see them again? That feels like that's what Feels like that's what the troll from Brian is. Sorry,
I feel
Brian.
like that was pointed and directed, Brian.
Yeah. There's a little bit of a delay, so sometimes it gets a little bit confusing to figure out what specific comments are. But yeah, we definitely could talk more about grad school stuff. I'm sure there are some people that have been on the streams, but I know that in general we probably are a slightly more younger audience. But grad school especially, thinking about also what kind of teachers, because for undergrad, I think the most important thing is a good teacher. For your graduate degree, a good teacher is really good too, don't get me wrong. But you might also consider a teacher that does the job that you want to do, that might be able to help connect you. Mm-hmm. That could be just as valuable. And, again, like the grass is always greener, but all of my tuba teachers, at least, were people who were kind of exiting their playing time when I started studying with them. So it's like the amount of gigs that they could have given me were diminishing by that point in time. Whereas, I know people who've gone to school and played in the symphony orchestra sitting next to their professor, those sorts of things. So I think that, that can be really helpful. Doing that as an undergrad, maybe you end up playing in, the Chicago Symphony next to your teacher or something, but it's a little less likely, I would say. But again, not impossible. And if that's your ultimate goal, I mean, it's not necessarily a bad choice either. So there are lots of different reasons. Looking at where people are winning jobs and things. So the question, can Zach play bebop tuba? I wonder if...
I think that question should be rephrased to, should Zach play bebop tuba?
I'm not going to do it now. The closest thing that I can... some modern day tuba is the best I can point you to, which I don't think I've ever had... Or no, there is a YouTube video, but it might take me a second to find. But I'll find it. I'll put it in the chat because it's important.
Modern day tuba.
Modern day tuba, which was a big band chart that Bob Mincer wrote, but he didn't really write it for the tuba. He wrote it for the bass clarinet, which he was calling the modern day tuba.
Oh, really?
Yes. And then at some
That's hilarious.
And it was kind of a goofy thing because it was like, because he did it, I think he had, it was like initially like a small group thing, and it was funny because he showed up with it, and this was in between my sophomore and junior year of college. It's like not like I knew nothing, but I definitely didn't know everything by any stretch. And he just handed me a part, and then it was in treble clef, so it's like, oh, okay, I guess I'll just read treble clef. I can kind of do that well enough, but like let me think about it for a second. Played it, sounded terrible, and he's just like, it's B flat treble. It's like,
that would have been good to know.
Definitely would have been good to know. And yeah, it's fine that I didn't, and it all worked out in the end.
Right.
But yeah, it was definitely a learning experience of getting a chart and just kind of assuming things and then finding out that my assumptions were incorrect. But again, it all worked out in the end. I'm having trouble finding the video that I want. There's another one that is definitely the year that I was in there, but I think that this one might not be as good, if I remember correctly.
While you're looking up that video, I'll say for those of you keeping score at home, if you're interested in reading or ever get past a B flat treble clef part, like something from like a trumpet or something like that, all you got to do, for those keeping score at home, for the uninitiated, you might already know this. All you have to do is just read it like it's in tenor clef. And, I think add 2 flats, right? Just take, like wherever you are in the,
or take away 2
sharps and flats. Subtract 2 sharps or add 2 flats wherever you are. I don't know if that's like a faux pas thing to do in the euphonium world, because I know like there's like, the baritone T, C. I don't want to get into that.
So my feeling on that is essentially that like all you need to do is to play the note that the composer intended for you to play. that's ultimately your only job as a performer. Or not your only job, but that's the main thing. And however you
seems like a lofty ideal.
however you achieve that, it doesn't really matter, to me. So, what I would say is, you don't really want to have a translation layer on things, if that makes sense.
Right.
Just think about transposing chord changes. Do you
it's the worst.
If you're especially like, it's a key change, like you haven't been able to like listen to them at all. Solo right now, here's B flat changes. Are you going to do as well, even though you fundamentally understand it and can do it? You might do okay, but
I might do okay. If I know the tune already, I might be okay.
Right.
But I'm going to go by feel and not by looking at it, because I cannot read transpose chord changes fast enough. I know this because I've tried it and failed greatly.
But even
in like moments.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, moments where this is another small school thing. There were 2 jazz bands at my undergrad, and I got to like cut my teeth on a lot of instruments in a big band setting that I otherwise would not have been able to. I played trumpet, I played tenor saxophone, I played drums, I played piano. It was awesome. But reading changes in like saxophone or trumpet world, I just folded so bad. It was embarrassing. So I just had to like learn the tune beforehand and then blow over it, and it was fine. But it's just hard to do.
And I haven't like or I guess it's not entirely true, but I didn't sight read changes yesterday, but I had a little time off from the camp, and there's a jazz component to the camp, and I poked my head in, and they had me play a little bit with them. They're playing Monk's Dream, which is not a tune that I like really know. And
I'm working on that one right now.
And they only had, it was baritone and alto saxophone. So you bet what parts they had? All E flat. And it's like I definitely played a couple half steps or a half step off a couple of times. Because it's weird to see what looks to me to be a B natural but it's actually a G natural, which is a B flat.
Right.
So, those transposition things definitely can get weird. But those sort of tricks are helpful. I mean, that's why I could even get by, because it was, that head is a little, it's not like that hard, but I'd never played it before. And there's some fast
I imagine
notes.
that it looks weird on paper. Yeah, that would be, you would have to know it.
Right. And so just like sight reading those changes, I only got, if I couldn't just read it as bass clef, I don't know how well I would have done, with that in mind. I mean, it was a low pressure. It was an educational setting, and they were learning this new tune, so it wasn't a big deal or anything. But yeah, and the B flat treble thing, I guess my thinking and my like caution to someone who's specifically a euphonium player. If you're a trombonist, I don't think that, unless you're doing a lot of brass band things, I wouldn't worry about this. And by brass band, I should specify British style brass band. But basically, those sorts of mistakes of mistransposing and accidental. I mean, obviously, if I did that all the time, I would get better. But you don't really want to have a translation layer of, okay, F sharp is E natural and treble, B flat treble to, concert. It's like those sorts of things I think can kind of hurt you if you're really responsible for sight reading well and your things are fast paced and stuff like that. I think that I guess what I would say is that can betray you if that's your only way of doing it, I guess. Does that make sense?
Definitely.
But for me, I don't play in a British style brass band, and in the United States, treble clef euphonium baritone does still exist. Not doing that all the time has not really got me into too much trouble. But there are euphonium pieces that only come in one of those 2 clefs.
Right.
That's a real thing, and it's like, do you want to play this piece? Do you also want to input it into Sibelius? I know I don't. And I can't. There was one thing that I played one time that it was B flat treble, and I just dealt with it. It wasn't like super super hard. That's not how I'd want to play the most modern concerto or something that's really really difficult. That would definitely not be my favorite scenario.
Oh, absolutely not.
But someone who plays euphonium teaches euphonium a little bit more than I do. like our good friend Matt Kuhnler, I don't think it makes even a bit of difference if it's bass clef, B flat treble, or tenor clef. I think that information is almost irrelevant for someone who's deep into that.
Right.
But you find professionals. I'm not going to name names, but what I will say is there are two top tier euphonium players that I can think of, like elite players that I know struggle with the one that they're not comfortable with.
As far as the transposition?
Yeah, and like if you're a composer and you write for them, it's like you better write it in the clef that they want. And one of them is bass clef, one of them is B flat treble.
Huh.
And
that's interesting.
They went to music school and like I'm sure that they can do the other one, but like never really spent a lot of time doing it.
Right. And now they've gotten to a point where they can just request their preference.
And both of them play everything from memory anyway, so like it's kind of a moot point, Right.
It's like just send them the MIDI stems; they'll be fine. Right. They'll figure it out.
But I think yeah. Go ahead.
I have a question.
Yeah.
This is showing a area of knowledge that I don't really understand, or I out of ignorance. Why is there treble clef baritone? Like I thought that. Well, maybe you tell me. What is it? Why? Where did that get its start? Because I thought that was an educational measure, was having things in treble clef. But is it historically something that has happened more often in British style brass band?
Sorry. So are you asking?
Here's what I thought. I'll tell you what I thought. This is not founded by anything that any professional has ever told me. When I saw treble clef baritone parts in band class as a kid, I thought, that's so the trumpet kids can switch over easily. Makes sense. And I never thought about it past that. I had no idea that that was actually an understood, no, baritones, euphoniums play in this transposition.
So I think I kind of know what you're asking, and maybe this helps, maybe this is not exactly what you're asking, but I don't think that there's a relationship between United States middle schoolers, getting a treble clef part and the British style brass band being in B flat treble as well.
So those are two separate things?
Yeah, I think that you're correct in your thinking. It's keeping it all the same is a little bit easier, all things considered. And also, even tuba and treble clef was a little bit more common, in the United States. I mean, it's been a very long time since that was common, but that was at one point a little bit more common. And then British style brass band, I think part of the British style brass band thing is, while there are professionals who do it, and again, I'm definitely not the expert. I've never even been to England, although it's on my list. But I'm not the expert, so if someone feels very strongly, or my teacher said this, they could be right. But my understanding is that kind of historically with the brass bands, those were not really professional groups. And I think, even today, they're like most of the competitions are specifically not for professional groups, although there are examples of professional brass bands. And just because they're not quote unquote professionals doesn't mean that doesn't make it bad either. That's kind of an important distinction. But I think that the thinking is, it's not just a free for all by any stretch. But I think it's a little bit more of what instrument? We need someone to play this instrument. So I've never played this one before, but I have brass experience. Because a lot of the instruments, have you played alto horn before? Like that.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And I've known people who did brass band stuff, particularly in Chicago, that they were trumpeters that had cornets and alto horns, and sometimes they'd have a baritone or two just lying around the house. And it was I think having that many different spectrums of bore sizes kind of makes it all a little more fluid. The distance between a euphonium and a trumpet doesn't look that bad when maybe you've had a semester where you played on alto horn. Yeah,
and the difference between a baritone and a euphonium, because there are both of them in there, it's that's not that big. The different. And then when you add E flat tuba, it's not just tuba, it's B flat and E flat. So the difference between a euphonium and E flat, it's still not nothing, but it's definitely there definitely are some things. So I think that, my understanding historically with brass bands, it was kind of like a let's keep people occupied and keep them out of trouble. Just like keeping towns overall a little less rowdy, I think is kind of part of it. So I think it's if everything's in B flat treble and, especially when it's, it's an E flat instrument or it's a B flat instrument and you just, it says C and,
Right.
I do this,
Button works.
It's like the button does what you think it should do, even if that's not necessarily what your ear says is the same.
Right.
So I think that's, to me, as I'm definitely an outsider to that. I've never performed in a brass band. I've subbed in one before, but UNT has one. I never played in one. I never did anything with them. So it's just that's kind of my understanding overall is kind of the origin of it. It's just like keeping it all the same is easy, kind of in the same way that saxophones do it. It's like I guess those are, it's like you press this button, this note comes out, but that note changes,
Right, but your G is 1, 2, 3 on every saxophone. You press 1, 2, 3, you're going to get a G. The G might sound different, but
right,
but you're going to get your G.
It's in it, and it also, those traditions are not that distant either. It's like I don't know how much you know about Adolf Sax. I'm sure you know that one of the instruments he invented, right?
The kazoo.
What? But the saxophone, right? That, I'm assuming.
Right. All right. Yeah. Keep going.
Well, but do you know other instruments that he invented?
Nope.
Do you know about the sax horns?
No. Wait. What is a sax horn?
So the sax horn, I might as well throw this up on screen since I have the technology. A sax horn. They're all different sizes, and I'll try to find a picture that illustrates that well. And before I even put this on screen, there are lots of different iterations of sax horns. There's some that are for military purposes and have bells that go behind them. So maybe I'll show that first. Let's see.
Gosh, this is like a whole world I've opened up. While you're opening up your images, I'm going to answer Brian's question of favorite improvised solos. That's tricky. One that I really liked that I listened to today was Al Gray's solo on what is the song? Did You Call Her Today? What's the actual the non-contrafact version of that song? In a Mellow Tone. Al Gray's solo on In a Mellow Tone from the Count Basie Band's album Breakfast, Dance, and Barbecue is a masterpiece of plunger playing. And it's just so good. I freak out every time I listen to it. And I like to do jogging, and I listen to that solo all the time. I'll rewind the song and listen to it over and over again while I'm jogging, which is probably a pathologically strange behavior, but I get the big endorphins from the Al Gray plunger solos. So there you have it. Anyways, sax horns. Look at that thing.
So these are, it says set of bell back, I think is what that says, because these
Why are they so long?
Because they're just only. It is what it is. But so these are theoretically, you're in front of the soldiers and you're signaling something, and it's being, shot back.
Goes over the back.
Right. So yeah, that's essentially what we're kind of looking at here with this. And there are other types. These are kind of still somewhat similar. And these were in America, to be clear too. They're a lot of these have Civil War era, kind of insignificance, I guess is a good way to put it. But there also are some, there are modern ones. Who makes them? Courtois.
Modern day sax horn.
Yeah, Courtois makes some, and they look like euphonium-ish things. They're, if you looked quickly, you might think that it's a euphonium. But you can kind of see that that's not a euphonium that I know. With
what key is that in?
I think this one's in B flat. I'm pretty sure.
See. It's just kind of a funny euphonium.
Right. And I don't know all the differences, bore size sort of stuff, but this is what kind of a modern sax horn is. And there's actually, I should find that as well. I'll look for that real quick. There's I believe a French group that plays on these Courtois sax horns, and I saw them play. Maybe it was an iTech. I can't remember where it was, but I remember whatever conference or whatever it was. It was like that was like my favorite thing. That was like the big takeaway. Was just like, did you hear? I just like, and it didn't really have to do with the instrument necessarily. It was just like it was musically really great. So I'd like to give them a shout out, and I also should remember their name, but I'm sorry that I didn't. But the original sax horn, that's kind of the predecessor to a lot of the low brass instruments that we have. So I'll mute this. Let's see here.
Ooh.
Yeah, so I can't remember where it was, and I'll put this link in the chat in a second. But yeah, no one needs to see these analytics. But yeah, they I just remember them sounding so great. I don't remember this video necessarily, but I just remember that conference or whatever it was. They sounded great. But it's these are like euphoniums, but if you do a little bit more research, you can kind of find a little bit more about the sax horn. That's kind of in the United States. There's a lot of Civil War era sort of stuff to it, and I think it was used like in I'm not sure I'm not a Civil War expert by any stretch, but I don't know both sides used or exactly if it was always used or whatever, but it definitely was around that time period, and it had militaristic implications.
I see.
So that's why the bells were behind them, because you'd put them in front.
That makes enough sense. They look more ergonomic than our modern day euphonium. Yeah,
I'm not really sure. And there also are some really weird ones with 4 or 3+2, because it's kind of the thing that's interesting. I was talking to this at the camp today, because one of the kids asked me. I think it was a middle schooler, was asking me what is a chimbasso, and it's just what is.
That's a good question.
Just something about what is this weird instrument, and I just kind of and then kind of got a rabbit hole of talking about weird brass instruments that they hadn't really heard of, and it's at the end of the day, brass instruments they're really simple. There's not a whole lot going on with the mechanics of how they work. It's
right.
If we start with just what a bugle is, it's all of these brass instruments are just different length bugles, and then we add valves to them or add a slide to them, and then we can change the bugle length on the fly.
Right. That's nuts.
You can wrap it, put a second bell on it, like a double bell euphonium. It's there are all these different weird, why does that exist?
Right.
I don't know. It doesn't really need to, but it can.
You can. Now you got two bugles.
Has science gone too far?
Yes.
Putting a second bell, or Wrath has done a bunch of custom trombone projects. I'm sure I've sent them to you when I've seen them, but over many years. But they did a double valve alto trombone that I saw one time. They've done ones with where the second valve, it looks just like a second valve, and it can be a second valve, but it can also be converted to a secondary forward-facing bell or a secondary backwards-facing bell.
That's dangerous.
Right. It's so you can switch back and forth between a muted bell or not, or a directionally different bell. That's
pretty sick, actually.
It's it's goofy.
Just, we're going to essentially Ellington, buddy. We got our mute switching horns.
Right. So yeah, it's just, it's a bunch of metal tubes. Let's call it what it is,
bunch of bugles.
Right. So yeah, it's an interesting little thing for sure. Yeah. Well, we should probably call it there. I know it's not the longest stream we've had, but
this was an eye-opening conversation for me.
Yeah, we can. I knew a good amount of I've always been fascinated by brass instruments, to the surprise of absolutely no one. But I've always known a decent amount about most of the kind of weird brass instruments, but also for my DMA comprehensive exams, I had a whole section that was just tell us about this instrument, this weird instrument that you've never seen in person before, like the French C tuba, or Bombardino, like what, whatever, there are lots of different.
Bombardino.
Yeah, and some of it's just kind of like language changed things, but like all of this sort of stuff was coming together like at the same time, but it's on its own in different countries. I think that's what makes it interesting when you didn't have the internet. What was happening in France and what was happening in Germany, although not that far away, or what's happening in Italy, or England, or the United States, yeah, they had some stuff was being shared and some information was being shared, but a lot of it just wasn't, and not always in a hostile way, just in it's hard to share information because it's
it's far away,
right? And we don't have computers, but yeah. Maybe we'll jump into some topics next week of some different brass instruments that might be kind of fun to talk about. Maybe that could be a recurring section, although we will definitely run out at some point.
Right on.
But
I'm
cool.
ready to go into this.
Yeah. Well, we'll call the stream there. Thanks everyone for watching. And next week, I thought I'd have a plan to talk about by this time, but I don't have a plan. I think what's going to happen is that there will still be a stream probably on Wednesday night, if that works for you, Connor, but with someone else that isn't me.
Oh.
So I need to figure that out from a technical perspective. Basically, I'm going to be out of town, and the family that I'm staying with, I don't trust their internet to hold this stream together. And so I think it'll just be easier, and I also don't want to bring everything. So what'll probably end up happening, which I think might be a funny little thing, is I'll be in the chat.
There you go.
Because I don't have something at that time, but it might be contingent on the other person's schedule. So let's all plan on it being Wednesday next week, and we'll be back we should be back to Wednesdays at that point. Sounds good? All right.
Sounds good.
We will see everyone, I might not. Connor and a mystery guest host will probably see everyone next Wednesday. All right.
Alrighty.
See everyone next week.
Bye.